There is a world that lives only in whispers. A world before the great tide of memory, before the ink of scribes and the boasts of kings. It lies buried, dusty scrolls. To find it, we must listen. Listen to the echoes of a drowned world. Imagine a shoreline that no longer exists. A coastline of impossible green, fringing a great, placid lake of fresh, sweet water. The air here, in the 7th millennium before Christ, is thick with the scent of damp earth, of flowering reeds, and of wood smoke, clinging to the morning mist. This is the edge of the world. Not a border of nations, for there are none. Not a frontier of empires, for the very idea has not yet been born. This is a frontier of existence itself. The people who live here are pioneers, pushing into a verdant paradise that has emerged from the long, cold shadow of the Ice Age. Their lives are governed by a rhythm we have long since forgotten. The rhythm of the sun's rise and fall over the water. The rhythm of the migrating birds whose cries fill the sky in spring and autumn. The rhythm of the lake itself. It is their provider, their highway, their sacred place. Its gentle tides are as predictable as their own breathing. They have built their homes near its edge, planted their first hesitant crops of emmer wheat and barley in the fertile soil along its banks. They believe it is a benevolent God. They believe it is eternal. They have no concept of history, for nothing has ever truly changed. They have no fear of apocalypse, for they cannot imagine an end to this world of water and green. Their ancestors have lived this way. Their children will live this way. The lake has always given. It has never taken away. This world is a deep, peaceful inhalation. And it is holding its breath, just before the scream. But this world would end. It would be washed away, scoured from the earth so completely that its memory would survive only as a scar. A trauma, passed down from one generation to the next, until the true event was lost and only the terror remained. For centuries, it was a story whispered around dying embers, a myth of divine anger and human frailty. And then, it was written down. Not as history, but as a memory. The memory of a survivor, speaking to us from across a gulf of 4,000 years. His name was Utnapishtim. His words, saved from the wreckage of a library in ancient Nineveh, are the oldest echo of the great catastrophe. Reed hut, reed hut. Wall, wall. Reed hut, hearken. Wall, reflect. Man of Shuruppak, son of Ubratutu. Tear down your house, build a boat. Forsake possessions, and seek life. Spurn property, save your life. Aboard the boat, take the seed of all living things. It is a warning, delivered in a dream. A divine secret, leaked from the council of the gods. A flood was coming to annihilate everything. A single man, chosen to preserve the spark of life. The story is familiar. It resonates in the sacred texts of peoples across the globe. But in the Epic of Gilgamesh, it is raw, visceral. It is not a tale of salvation, but a chronicle of cosmic terror. Utnapishtim describes the work. The frantic, desperate building of a vessel of impossible size, sealed with bitumen and pitch. He describes loading it with his family, with craftsmen, with animals, and with gold. And then, he describes the end. At the first glimmer of dawn, a black cloud rose from the horizon. Adad, the god of storms, thundered within it. A stupor of despair went up to heaven. When the god turned brightness into darkness. When he smashed the land like a cup. The ancient poet struggles for words to describe the scale of it. A fury that frightened even the gods who had unleashed it. The gods were terrified by the flood. They fled and went up to the heaven of Anu. The gods cowered like dogs, crouching by the outer wall. For 6 days and 7 nights. The wind blew, the floodstorm swept the land. And then, after the storm, came a silence more terrible than the noise. The silence of total annihilation. The silence of a world erased. I opened a vent, and light fell on my face. I looked at the world, and there was silence. All mankind had been turned to clay. The landscape was as level as a rooftop. All mankind had been turned to clay. For millennia, this was the power of the story. A metaphor for divine punishment. A cautionary tale. A myth. We, in our modern age, heard the echo, but we had forgotten the shout. We assumed it was just a story. But what if it wasn't? In the late 20th century, two scientists, William Ryan and Walter Pittman, were studying the floor of the Black Sea. They were not searching for Noah's Arkansas. They were not hunting for myths. They were geologists, reading a different kind of text. Not one of clay and reeds, but of sediment cores and sonar maps. And the story they uncovered was, in its own way, as terrifying as the one told by Utnapishtim. They found evidence of a ghost landscape, buried thousands of feet below the waves. They found the unmistakable signs of an ancient shoreline, with beaches and sand dunes, far below the current sea level. Their data told them that thousands of years ago, the Black Sea was not a sea at all. It was a vast, isolated freshwater lake, just as the first farmers had known it. A low-lying basin, cut off from the rest of the world's oceans. But at the end of the last ice age, something was changing on a global scale. The great ice sheets that had covered continents were melting. And as they melted, the oceans of the world began to rise. Year after year, century after century, the level of the Mediterranean crept higher, pushing relentlessly against the thin sill of rock and earth at the Bosphorus. The pressure was immense. A world of water, straining to break through. Sometime around 7,600 years ago, the dam gave way. It did not begin as a gentle overflow. The models predict a cataclysm. A channel torn open, a wound in the earth through which the salt sea began to pour. The initial trickle would have become a deafening roar within hours. A waterfall, with the force of 200 Niagara Falls, plunging from the Mediterranean down into the freshwater lake basin below. It was not a flood as we know it. It was an invasion. A salt sea, a hungry predator, pouring into the placid, freshwater world. Every single day, over 10 cubic miles of seawater cascaded in. The sound would have been audible for hundreds of miles. The water level in the basin rose by 6 inches every day. For the people living on that ancient, fertile shoreline, the people of our forgotten world, it would have been the end of all things. Their fields, their homes, their sacred places. Not just flooded, but consumed by a rising tide of salt that advanced across the plains at a speed of nearly a mile a day. It was a relentless, unstoppable horizon of gray water, devouring the known world. They did not have days to pack. They had hours to flee. Here, the line between science and myth dissolves. A catastrophic geological event, on a scale that beggars the imagination. Is this it? Is this the source of the story? A memory of a real-world apocalypse, so devastating that it was seared into the collective consciousness of humanity, an echo that would ripple through the ages, from the clay tablets of Mesopotamia to the pages of the Bible. The terror was real. The silence that followed was real. And the world that was lost, is still there. Waiting, in the dark, beneath the waves.